Well, it's officially game week for the 2019 college football season, at least for a few teams, right? We have this week 0 this year. We've had it the last couple of years too. But we do have the week 0 kicks off this weekend, Saturday, with the big game, of course, being Florida versus Miami. However, this will not be a regular during the season week here on LouTube. I'm going to flash the regular season schedule up on the screen now so you guys will know what to expect starting next week. That will be the schedule that we do in terms of videos and live shows every single week during the course of the season. That never changes. This week, though, we're going to continue with the 2019 college football team season preview and prediction videos, 2 per day, like we've been doing, to try to get as many knocked out as we can before everyone else has their official start to the season the following week. I am going to do a preview of the Florida versus Miami game this week. That will probably be on Wednesday or Thursday. Haven't decided yet, but other than that, though, we're going to do the regular team preview and prediction videos that we've been doing for the last month or so. The live show schedule for this week: Tuesday night, 10 p.m., Thursday night, 10 p.m., Saturday morning, 9 a.m. for College Game Day Watch with Lou. So 3 live shows this week. Anyway, let's get started with today's first of 2 college football team season preview and prediction videos from the SEC East. I think this is the only team I haven't done yet from the SEC, so this will wrap up the SEC East, I'm pretty sure, the Kentucky Wildcats. Hey, good morning, it's Uncle Lou here. Yeah, that's right, it's me, Uncle Lou, and I'm live for you on LouTube today, so thanks for watching. I really appreciate it also. And 2, subscribe to this channel if you're not already. I post college football videos year-round, almost every single day. Some of them are watchable. All of them are entertaining, though, I promise. Give this video a thumbs up if you're excited for the start of the season. Listen, like I mentioned at the top, it's officially game week now. Even if you're not a Florida or a Miami fan, you know you're excited about the start of college football season. You know you're going to watch that game. I can't wait. Give this video a thumbs up. It would really help me out a lot, and I would appreciate it. All right, up today, like I mentioned, the Kentucky Wildcats. Going to do the same way we always do it. We'll recap last year, look at who they lost, who they got coming back, then we'll put the schedule up on the screen and try to figure out an overall record for Kentucky and exactly which teams they might beat or lose to. All right, let's wrap up last year, right? Kentucky, pretty good season. Not as good as a lot of the seasons they've had in years past, though. I think they ended up being, a number 2 seed in the NCAA tourney before losing, I believe it was to Auburn in the round of 8.
Not basketball, man. Football preview.
There are no Kentucky football fans. Who would watch that?
You must have been asleep, man. You didn't see him last year?
What, like this guy?
I'll tell y'all again. Meet us at Kroger Field. Uncle Lou, meet us at Kroger Field.
You want me to make a video just for that guy?
No, they won 10 games, man. Bunch of them now.
They won 10 games?
Yes. Have you ever even seen a game?
Stop it. All right, here we go, Kentucky. Great year last year. All-time great year for Kentucky in a lot of different ways, right? Hats off to Kentucky. Nobody saw that season coming. Absolutely nobody. The over-under on wins for Kentucky last year heading into the season was about 5.5, depending on where you look. Some had 5, some had 6. It was about 5.5, the over-under on wins for Kentucky. Not a lot of expectations last year for Kentucky heading into the season at all, and they completely blew those expectations away. Unreal. 9-3 in the regular season, right? Ended up 10-3 after a bowl win in the, I believe it was the Citrus Bowl over Penn State, which was a great game. I think it was a 3 or 4 point game or something. We didn't have a whole lot of good bowl games last year. Vandy and Baylor was really good. This was one of the few good ones that we had too. And Kentucky came out on top over Penn State to finish the season 10-3. They were 5-3 in the SEC, which was good enough for second in the SEC East. For Kentucky, that's great. One of the best seasons they've had. Florida was also 5-3, but of course, Kentucky finished ahead of them because, well, Kentucky beat them. Second in the East, ahead of Florida. Who were the losses? Lost to Texas A&M, by 6 points in overtime. Texas A&M was not a bad team last year. They were a little inconsistent from week to week. Maybe that was to be expected with a first-year coaching staff or a new coaching staff in there under Jimbo Fisher. They weren't, so that was a pretty good win there. A pretty good loss. If you know, no one likes to lose, but some losses, you can look at some losses and say, well, that's not a bad loss. You look at other losses, like, well, that's terrible. Getting blown out by Purdue, for example, would be a terrible loss. Giving up 55 points to Iowa and losing would be a terrible loss. You lost to UGA 34-17. Tons of hype around that game. Probably the most anticipated Kentucky game, football-wise, in my lifetime. Georgia and Kentucky were tied for the East at that point. That game pretty much was going to determine the winner of the East. It was being played in Kentucky. Crazy atmosphere up there. Georgia jumped on them kind of early, pounded them with the ground game, and Kentucky was just never really able to get anything going. They lost 34-17, and then Georgia beat them again the following week when you lost to Tennessee 24-7. You just never even got off the bus for that game. You were demoralized after that UGA game. You were clearly a better team than Tennessee. I'm not taking anything away from Tennessee. This was a big win for them, probably their best win last year. This or the Auburn game. Maybe they beat Auburn on the road. So that's not meant to be an insult or a knock on Tennessee, even though I know I like to make a few jokes about Tennessee here and there in these videos. You do see this happen from time to time where a loss actually costs a team 2 losses when they're not able to rebound. Kentucky, not used to being in that spot they were in heading into that Georgia game last year with so much on the line in terms of winning a division, and to lose the way they did, they just were not able to rebound, and it cost you the following week, in my opinion, against Tennessee. So those were your 3 losses. A&M and UGA, both pretty good teams. Tennessee, that was a bad loss. You were a better team, and you let that one get away. But again, something I harp on all the time on here when people tell me how stupid I am for picking certain teams to lose to certain other teams. Almost every single team, almost every single year, loses at least one game that they're not supposed to lose. For you, it was Tennessee. The good news for Kentucky, you won a bunch of games you weren't supposed to win. You beat Florida for the first time since the 80s. You beat Mizzou, and Mizzou was a good team last year. And of course, like I mentioned, Penn State in the Citrus Bowl. So 3 pretty good wins there. You would like to have avoided that Tennessee loss if at all possible. But again, overall, one of the best seasons we have seen Kentucky have in football in 40 years, finishing 10-3. What's going to happen this year? Head coach Mark Stoops returns, right? 36-39 is his record in his 6 years at Kentucky. Now, to be fair to Mark Stoops, he inherited a really bad team in a program with not much football history at all. And the history they do have is 40, 50, and 60 years old. Kentucky has just not been considered a prominent team in football in a very long time. So has Mark Stoops gotten them to the point now where we can expect Kentucky to be competitive year in and year out in the SEC East? I'm not convinced of that. But I would be very surprised if we were to see any 3 or 4 win seasons from Kentucky under Mark Stoops going forward. And we saw a lot of those prior to him getting there. Let's start with the obvious. Everyone knows Kentucky lost Benny Snell and Josh Allen. I mean, we've heard about that all offseason. Now, if you don't follow Kentucky closely, that's probably all you know about Kentucky, is that they lost Benny Snell and Josh Allen. And that is a huge deal. You cannot overestimate how important Benny Snell and Josh Allen were to Kentucky last year. Josh Allen was the National Defensive Player of the Year, okay? Nobody could replace that. So you haven't recruited at a very high level, but even if you were, teams don't replace National Defensive Players of the Year. They just don't. Alabama doesn't replace its best defensive player every year. Hardly any team does. It's very hard. I mean, and he was an absolute monster. Benny Snell, your all-time leading rusher. You're not replacing him. Those are the obvious things that we know. Those two just aren't getting replaced, okay? That's the bad news. More bad news. It's not just those two that you lose. Yeah, those were your best 2 players. Benny Snell, your best player on offense. Josh Allen, your best player on defense. You lose 14 starters off of that team. it's hard for any team to maintain their current level losing 14 starters in 1 year, especially a team like Kentucky who doesn't recruit at an elite level. You just don't. Yeah, Kentucky has recruited a handful of really good players. They even have a 5-star on their roster. Josh Allen and Benny Snell were or Josh Allen was a 3-star. I can't remember if Benny Snell was a 3 or 4, but anyway, you develop them and you look where that's not the norm. You can't recruit nothing but 3 stars year in and year out and expect to win 10, 11, 12 games a year. It's never going to happen. You can have an occasional year like Kentucky where you win 10, but it's not going to be consistently winning at that level like your Alabamas, your Clemsons, your Ohio States, your Oklahomas, your Georgias. I mean, the teams you see in the top 10 in recruiting every year tend to finish the season in the top 10 every year for a reason, and a lot of it is recruiting. So let's take a look at your offense. It's going to have to be way more balanced in 2019 than what we saw last year. Way more balanced. You relied way too heavily, in my opinion, on the running game last year. Now, you didn't have much of a choice. Your quarterback, Terry Wilson, was a first-year Power 5 starter. He had some experience, I think, at JUCO. In terms of Power 5, he didn't have a whole lot of experience. And he was one of these athletic runaround quarterbacks that wasn't necessarily known for his arm. So the combination of him being a threat to run, plus everything you got from Benny Snell, gave teams a lot of trouble. When it came to throwing the ball, he struggled, and so Kentucky sort of pulled away from that for a while. Of course, coming into Kentucky, the nickname, Touchdown Terry Wilson. By midway through the year, that nickname had been changed to Turnover Terry Wilson. Up until the last, I think, 2 or 3 games of the year, Terry Wilson had more interceptions than he did touchdown passes. That ended up changing. I think he ended up positive 2 or 3 touchdowns to interceptions by the end of the year, but way too many turnovers. You gotta tone that down if you're Kentucky this year, because you can't afford to be just a running team this year. You can't. Like I said, you're not replacing Benny Snell. Now, I like the running backs that Kentucky has in terms of like a running back by committee type approach, and I think that's what you'll see them do, more like what Alabama or Georgia does, rotating 3 or 4 different running backs in throughout the game. I'm not saying that the running backs you have are as talented as Alabama's or Georgia's, but I think you're going to take that same approach as opposed to last year where you tended to rely almost solely on Benny Snell. A.J. Rose was his backup. He did get 6.2 yards per carry, so he's no slouch, but he's no Benny Snell. So I think we're going to see a lot more A.J. Rose, and he got 2 or 3 guys behind him that I think are going to play a lot too. Like I said, sort of the in and out running back by committee type approach. Terry Wilson was dead last in passing yards per game last year. Again, run first team, a mostly run team. That will change this year. You got to be more balanced. On the offensive line, 3 of your starters are gone, including an All-American. And again, when you start looking at Kentucky last year to this year, these things are just jumping out at you. You lose the best defensive player you've had in 50 years in Josh Allen, National Defensive Player of the Year, top 5 pick in the NFL draft. You lose Benny Snell, your all-time leading rusher at running back. He is gone. And you lose your All-American on the offensive line to the NFL. So it's going to be hard to replace these guys, this offensive lineman included. What's his name? Bunchy Stallings. Now, you do have a 5-star left tackle. And wasn't he hurt last year? Missed all of last year, I think, with an injury. So he's back. So that helps make up some of what you lose from Stallings, although I think he was a guard. But so anyway, you got to replace 3 starters. One of them, as long as he's healthy, that 5-star Young, I think will be good. We'll see what the rest of the line will look like. Wide receiver, Lynn Bowden is absolutely elite. I love this guy, playmaker, but that's all you have at wide receiver. You have one of the worst wide receiver groups in the SEC, period. That's not just my opinion. You guys know I like to look up these position unit rankings from these analysts and these publications like Athlon and Lindy's and all this kind of stuff. Athlon ranks Kentucky's wide receiver group as 10th in the SEC, so near the bottom. You got to find somebody besides Lynn Bowden, because the upper echelon teams in the SEC are going to have a cornerback that can lock Lynn Bowden down. Maybe not stop him completely, but they're going to a good defense with a good secondary and a good game plan can take one player out of a game, and that'll be Lynn Bowden. You got to find somebody else to complement him on the other side. Defense, 7 starters gone. So again, not just Josh Allen. It's Josh Allen and 6 other starters off one of the best defenses in program history. Last year's Kentucky defense was not just Josh Allen. They had some good players on that defense. 7 of them are gone. That was one of the best Kentucky defenses we've ever seen. Sixth in the nation in points per game allowed, only giving up 16.8 points per game. Unbelievable. And that defense, as good as Benny Snell was, that defense was solely responsible for 3 or 4 wins for Kentucky, because there was a stretch in the middle of the season where Kentucky didn't score over 20 points. I think 4 games straight, they didn't score over 20 or 24 points, and they went like 3-1 in that stretch because your defense was giving up 10 and 13 points a game. It was a really, really good defense. You're going to struggle to replace all those starters, but defensive line, most of your key contributors on the defensive line from last year returned. So if there was a strength of your defense heading into this year, I think it would be defensive line. Linebacker, team captain Daniel there at middle linebacker, I think he'll be pretty good, but you got some young guys you're going to have to play on the outside, and we just don't know what they're going to do yet. We'll see. Again, I don't think any of them are going to give you Josh Allen type numbers or ability. And then defensive backfield, you lose your entire secondary from last year. All 4 starters are gone from your secondary last year. You're going to see a lot of freshmen playing in Kentucky's secondary this year from the 2019 signing class. You have a few guys that played last year in nickel and dime situations and sort of backup role situations, but all the starters are gone, so you have a little bit of experience in the secondary, but I think we're going to see a ton of young guys play there for Kentucky, and that's very dangerous to do in the secondary against some of these teams you're going to be playing and their wide receivers. But anyway, let's throw the schedule up on the screen. You guys know how we do this. We'll go through it game by game. I'm going to give you a winner and a loser for every single game, and we'll try to come up with an overall record during the regular season for Kentucky at the end here. All right, you start off with Toledo. That should be a win. Let me say this before I go any further. There are some people that think Kentucky's going to completely fall off the map, like I mentioned in the beginning, because all they know about Kentucky is they lost Josh Allen and Benny Snell. And that's half true. They did lose those 2 guys. I don't think Kentucky is going to be as bad this year as some people are projecting. I've seen people saying Kentucky's going 4-8, 5-7. That would be an utter disappointment at this point. It really would. I think you're better than that. I don't think you're as good as you were last year, but I don't think you're going back to the quote unquote, regular Kentucky that we've come to know over the last 10 to 15 years and win 3, 4, 5 games. But okay, you're going to beat Toledo at home in an opening week non-con game. Second week, another non-con game at home, Eastern Michigan. I think you beat them. You're clearly better than those 2 teams. I think Kentucky has a lot of confidence heading into 2019 that they have not had in my lifetime. And the obvious reason for that, the 10-win season, also beating Florida last year, sort of getting that monkey off their back, first time beating them in 31 years. I think Kentucky will go into these first 2 games expecting to win, and that hasn't always been the case for Kentucky teams against lower classification schools. They'll go into these 2 games expecting to win, and they will win both those games. They'll start off 2-0 against 2 non-con teams, non-Power 5 teams. Week 3, home game, Florida. I've done my Florida preview already. If you've seen it, you know which way I'm headed here. Yes, Kentucky beat Florida last year for the first time in 31 years, whatever it was. We all know that. But if you look back over recent history between Kentucky and Florida, there's been 3 or 4 games that Kentucky had a really, really good chance to win over the last 5 or 6 years that they let slip away. I think one of the reasons for that is they just didn't think they could beat Florida. 31 years is a long time to go. And it's not a situation where they're only playing once every 4 or 5 years. They played every single year for 31 years in a row, and Florida found a way to win every single year. Won a game one time in the swamp in overtime that came down to the wire. In Kentucky a few years ago, Kentucky completely dominated the game, but for whatever reason, at 2 different occasions in that game, they sent only 10 men out on defense and left a Florida wide receiver completely by himself on the sideline and gave Florida 2 touchdowns to lose that game. So there was just a lot of situations like that over the last 6, 7, 8 years where Kentucky, outplayed Florida, or at least played to their level and came up short. I think that was a confidence issue. Like I mentioned, I don't think they have that problem anymore. This Kentucky team that we're going to see this year, they're more confident than any of us are about their team. I promise you that. And that hasn't always been the case. They believe they can win some of these tough games this year. And this is the first time they've gone into a season believing that, in my opinion, in a very long time. I think they beat Florida again and start the season 3-0 with a huge win at home. The goalpost may come down there. I don't know. I mean, they're going to go absolutely whatever it is, neck-bearded people in Kentucky do to celebrate, that's what they're going to do. I think Kentucky starts 3-0 with a huge win over Florida at home. On the road at Mississippi State, You beat them last year 28-7. I'm not convinced Mississippi State's going to be any better than they were last year. It looks to me, appears to me, it's my opinion anyway, they may have hired the wrong coach there when Mullen left. I'm not sure it's going to work out for Moorhead or whatever his name is there. Even though this is a road game and there is a lot of cowbell there, I don't think there will be quite enough. Kentucky starts off 2019 on a roll at 4-0. But then you got to take a second road trip in a row. All the way out west to Mississippi State where you'll get a win, and then all the way back east on the road at South Carolina. One of the toughest places in the East to play. You say what you want about South Carolina's team over the years, and I'll agree with you, it's been terrible. They do have a significant home field advantage there, especially in a game that they go into thinking they can win or really wanting to win. Now, you've owned them lately. You've beat them, I think, 5 times in a row. Before you start typing about that in the comment section, though, I want you to remember that Florida beat you 31 years in a row, and it didn't seem to matter last year, did it, when you beat them? If a 31-game winning streak doesn't matter, a 5-game winning streak definitely doesn't. You go on the road to Columbia and lose. I think these are 2 pretty evenly matched teams. I'm giving South Carolina the benefit of the doubt in this one because it's at their place. And back-to-back road games is not easy to do in any conference, especially in the SEC. You're 4-1. That takes you into your first bye week. Come out of that, you get one of the worst teams in the SEC, and you get them at home, Arkansas. Speaking of Arkansas, I did a preview on Arkansas the other day, a couple of days ago. Didn't talk hardly any trash about Arkansas. Why kick somebody when they're down? But apparently in the video, when saying the word Arkansas, I said Arkansas one time, which I didn't know that was an insult. I honestly didn't. I've heard people say that because maybe they missed, they don't know how to say the word or something. But anyway, I referred to him as Arkansas. Some Arkansas fan completely lost his mind in the comment section and just went full potato, like I was going to subscribe to this guy, but then he said R-Kansas instead of Arkansas. What an insult to the state, sir. No one knew that Arkansas was an insult to people from Arkansas, sir. I didn't know that. If I would have known that saying the word Arkansas was going to upset you that bad, I would have tried very hard not to refer to Arkansas as Arkansas. All I can do at this point is apologize for saying Arkansas. I will do my best not to say Arkansas again in the future when referring to either the state of Arkansas or the football team known as the University of Arkansas. I sincerely apologize to anyone associated either with the state of Arkansas or the football program known as Arkansas. I will do my best for it not to happen again. And sir, I hope you're still watching. I'm not sure if you are. Something tells me you probably aren't. I think you're in a rubber room, curled up in a fetal position, crying into a security blanket. That's just my opinion. But again, it was not my intention to trigger you when I said the word Arkansas. I really do apologize, and good luck to the Arkansas Razorbacks. And by the way, Arkansas is losing this game to Kentucky. Then Kentucky has to go on the road to UGA. I think that's a loss. You have to play them there. I already mentioned I don't think Kentucky's as good as they were last year. You got them at home. You're red hot, best team you've had in forever, and the game really wasn't competitive. I can't see you winning this game on the road in Athens. It could potentially be a good game, at least for a while, maybe. But I just think Georgia a little too good, a little too deep this year for Kentucky. I give Georgia the win there. Now you come back home and you play Missouri. Now this is an interesting game here. I think Missouri is going to be really good, and it wouldn't surprise me. And I've done a Missouri preview. You can click back and watch it. It would not surprise me at all if Missouri is undefeated heading into this game against Kentucky. The first half of their schedule is not difficult at all. There's a very good possibility they're undefeated when this game comes around. But just like that South Carolina game for you, where it was your second road game in a row, this is Missouri's second road game in a row, and I think you beat them. It'll be an upset. I think Missouri will probably be favored because I think they'll be undefeated at the most, maybe one loss here. You get them at home, though. That helps. And like I said, back-to-back road games for Mizzou. I think they lose the back end of that. You get what I think will be a pretty good win over a pretty good Missouri team. Second bye week then. Come out of that home game against Tennessee. I think you lose again to Tennessee. I think Tennessee is going to be a little bit better than they were last year. I don't think Kentucky is going to be quite as good as they were. Now, there's a lot of reasons you lost that Tennessee game last year that aren't related directly to Tennessee, and I mentioned some of those at the beginning. You played Georgia the week before you played Tennessee last year, and it just completely demoralized you. You had everything on the line against Georgia in terms of possibly winning the SEC East and all that, top 10 rankings. It didn't work out for you. You weren't able to get over it in enough time. You had to play Tennessee the following week at Tennessee, and you ended up getting beat pretty bad there, 24-7. I don't think Tennessee was 17 points better than you last year by any means. You were the better team, but you lost. I think you lose to them again this year. Like I said, I think they're going to be a little bit better. I think you're going to be a little bit worse, even though you get them at home. Coming off of a bye week, I think they find a way to get it done there. You lose to Tennessee. On the road at Vandy, I think you lose that one too. Again, this will be the game. Of all the games, really, this will be the one that you look at and you go, how did we lose that? Last year, it was the Tennessee game. You look back at that game and you wonder how in the hell Kentucky found a way to lose to Tennessee. I think this year you're going to look at this Vanderbilt game and say the same thing. You got to play them there. I don't think Vandy is very good. They'll probably only win, maybe 2 SEC games, possibly 3, something like that. But I just have a feeling this is going to be one of them. You get a loss on the road at Vandy. Come back home, play UT Martin in your final non-con game of the year. You should win that one, no problem. They're not a very good team. So a win for you there before your rivalry game every year against Louisville, who's an abject disaster at this point. They changed coaching staffs from last year. That doesn't matter. They still have the same players, and they're just not very good. You'll get a win there in the rivalry game for your final game of the season. So what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 8-4. I'm going to say this. I say this on a lot of videos. I'm pretty confident in Kentucky going 8-4 this year. Finding the 4 losses is obviously much, much harder to do. But I'm confident in the 8-4 pick that I have here. This looks like an 8-win schedule to me. At South Carolina, obviously a possibility of a loss there. At Georgia, that's probably the most definite loss that I see on the schedule. Let's be real. Florida will probably be favored over you, so I gave you a win at Florida. Maybe you win. Maybe you lose to Florida, but beat Vandy. That's very possible. Still be 8-4. But anyway, hard to pick the exact losses, especially on some of your middle tier teams, right? You have a lot of teams that win 6, 7, 8 games a year, and it's almost impossible to identify exactly which games they'll lose because it's a situation where a lot of those teams, beat each other up, so anyway, I'm going to go with that. I'm going to stick with that. That's my record prediction for Kentucky 2019, 8-4. Have a great morning.